Nora Speaks is a weekly podcast that tugs at the soul and consciousness of the Black community. With show topics such as youth empowerment, education, women's impact, and civic engagement, Nora Speaks challenges the listener to not only join the movement, but be the movement. On the show, you'll learn from insightful guests who have demonstrated capacity in these fields and more, and I'm your host, Nora Muhammad. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the Nora Speaks podcast, and I am your host, Nora Muhammad. I'm excited to be with you and bringing you episode 162 of the podcast. Thank you for being a valued listener and subscriber to the podcast. And if you are not a subscriber, I encourage you to subscribe on this app that you're listening to this podcast right now. If you have a favorite app, please make sure you subscribe so that you can be notified when a new episode drops, so that you can have that downloaded right onto your smartphone. And make sure you share it with family and friends if this podcast has value to you. And I hope that it does. You know, some things have come to mind and have come to light. Uh, I'm still dealing with or talking about some of the aftermath of the Monique posts and the Monique Instagram videos where she was discussing the way Black women come out in public in bonnets and pajamas. And actually, I think that this is going to end up being a 3-part series. The first episode, 161, the title was Monique is Right on this one. And this episode, I have titled it Correction is Not Condemnation. And I think the third episode, which would be coming after this one, will be about standards. But, first, let me just say, for those who listen to this podcast or listen to other podcasts and hear folks talking and challenging us to do better, to be better, a lot of times folks say, and they may even say it about Monique, they say, what are you, perfect? Nor are you perfect. And certainly I am not perfect. I mean, that is probably the easiest conversation to have because the answer is quite emphatically no, period, end of sentence. However, let's not turn off or turn away from a speaker who is challenging us all to correction, challenging us all to be better, challenging us all to be aware of some shortcomings or some insights that we may need so that we can improve as individuals, as families, as community members. So let's not turn away because that person that you're listening to or viewing is not perfect. Who is perfect? So because we accuse others of being hypocritical because they themselves may not be perfect or may not um, be 100% to the standard that they're calling us, that is no reason to turn away or to turn off. But rather, what I would encourage you to do is listen to what the individual is saying and determine, is there truth in it? Is there something in it for me? Is there something in it for you? And use that truth, use the principles that that person is sharing and apply them to your life so that you can be the best you, so that you can be the best employee, be the best mother, be the best wife, be the best father, be the best whatever it is that you're doing, the best leader, the best student, so that you can get all that you can and maximize your own potential. So to suggest that someone shouldn't be speaking because they're not perfect, well, then none of us should have anything ever to say. However, the goal is not perfection. The goal is to continue striving to be as good and as great as we all can be. So now that I have that out of the way, I want to have a conversation in this episode about the difference between correction and condemnation. And the reason why I think that this is so important. And the reason why I think that this is relevant is because of some of the comments that folks are leveling, an accusation that folks are leveling at Monique because of the post that she made in love. And they're accusing her of being judgmental. And I would argue that Monique is not being judgmental, in my opinion, that she is, in fact, just stating plain facts. And the awareness of these facts, or the speaking the facts, can be uncomfortable for people. And so it's just so much that we have to get into. And one thing, um, when we're raising our children, our sons and our daughters, and they're little, there is um, the need for strategy as we're rearing our children. Okay, wait, Nora, what are you talking about? You're talking about correction is not condemnation, and now you're talking about rearing children. Well, follow me, and you'll see why I start with how we rear our children. We have to be strategic. We have to be focused in rearing our children. And part of raising children, it is not just making sure they have some clothes to wear, some food to eat, a school to go to, and a house to live in. It is such a huge effort, and probably the greatest effort that any of us can take on. And our children are probably the greatest contribution, or of the greatest contribution that we can make to our communities and to society. When we are strategic and focused on maximizing or helping our children maximize their potential, that involves us taking a critical look at the environment that we put our children in, the diets that we give our children, the school and education that we give our children, and the character development, the moral development, the spiritual development that our children have. And in that guidance, in that training, and in that rearing, we have to correct them. We have to direct them. We have to guide them. And so when we see our children using language, engaging in behaviors, or expressing thought patterns that we know are not optimal for success, optimal for their confidence, optimal for their esteem, optimal for them to be able to tackle tasks and achieve goals, when we see that their behaviors, attitudes, language are not optimal for the product that we want to achieve in them, then we have to correct them. Now, sometimes we correct them sternly. Sometimes we correct them gingerly. Sometimes we correct them with an abundance of love, an abundance of joy. And sometimes we let them know in our correction, in the method of our correction, that we are deeply disappointed. Now, the reason why I'm talking about rearing our children and the guidance and focus and strategy that we must have is because as we are correcting our children while they're 2 and 3, and 7 and 11, and 14 and 17, 18 and 19, as we are going through their life and guiding them, correcting them, loving them, then when they meet their soccer coach, their basketball coach, their chemistry teacher, that coach is going to, at some point, give some kind of correction. If it's correcting something on their essay, their math equation, their skills, and their positioning in their sports, how do they receive correction from the coaches, from their teachers, from their professors, from their employers? If our children are not accustomed to guidance, to being trained, to correction, it's going to be very, very difficult for them to receive it anywhere else. I have worked with young women, young men, and you can tell the ones who get guidance, who get correction at home, because when they receive it, they respond to it. Now, what does the response look like? There's something called hear and obey. I recall watching my godson, in fact. I remember him at a track meet, and he was doing the long jump, and he was pretty new at it. And I'm over there and I'm watching him in the long jump pit. And he did one jump, his first jump. It was okay. And the official who was officiating the long jump, he himself was a former track athlete and he himself had jumped the long jump. So, as my godson was coming out of the pit, this official is giving him tips, giving him correction, giving him guidance. Now, he had no personal investment in this young man. He was just a gentleman who loved what he did and was pouring into this young guy. So, for my godson's second attempt, he improved by a foot, by an entire foot, because he listened and applied the correction and the guidance that he got from the official. So the official said, wow, great job. You did exactly what I asked. The official gave him some more tips. And for his third and last attempt, he made a personal best by exceeding not just the first, but even the second long jump attempt, because the young man heard what the official said and obeyed that guidance. And he was successful in that endeavor. And so that's what I'm talking about when we are guiding and molding, which includes correction, our children at home. Then they take the openness and the ability to be amenable to correction everywhere they go. So this display happened to be at the long jump pit at a track meet. And the young man was used to getting guidance, used to receiving correction, and he applied it. Now, that is just one example. We're going to be in the workplace and we're going to get reviews. We're going to get correction. We're going to get guidance in our workplace. How do we take it when we have to sit at our yearly or 6-month evaluation with our supervisor? And our supervisor is reviewing with us all of the expectations that was outlined in our orientation when we first started the job. Now we're at our review period, and our supervisor says, well, you didn't do X amount of reports. X amount of reports are required. You didn't get this done, or you did that, and that's really good. How do we receive that evaluation from our employer? Do we improve on it? Do we say thanks? Do you acknowledge that maybe you didn't do everything that you should have done, and you thank them, your employer, for acknowledging what you've done? Or do you storm out of the office and go and tell your colleagues about how awful this supervisor is, and then just start gossiping in the office? How do we manage correction? That starts when we are children in the home and being guided. I've dealt with young women. When you correct them, they get angry. They get an attitude. You say, wait, this wasn't that deep. I just said, when you're doing public speaking, do it like this. Your body language should be like that. I'm trying to help you be successful. And when you give a young woman correction who is not used to it, they receive it as a personal attack. A young person on the workplace, when they get correction from the supervisor, or when they get instruction from a supervisor, they perceive it as a personal attack, and they get angry, they get emotional, they get upset. I realize it's because they're not used to guidance. They're not used to training. They're not used to dealing with someone in authority that's not just giving them praise, but also giving them correction. So back to the subject here of this episode. Correction is not condemnation. And so what I've perceived in all of this with Monique is that a lot of women were taking and are taking what Monique is saying to us as being judgmental, as being condemning. And we have to understand the difference. When you're being corrected, when I'm being corrected, that just means that somebody is identifying an area that we've erred, just identifying an error on our part. Now, condemnation, on the other hand, is expressing a judgment, pronouncing somebody guilty. Now, Monique did not condemn the sisters. She's trying to improve us all. And I still say, like I said in episode 161, that is love. We get it wrong when we take correction as criticism, as punishment, as hatred, as judgment, or as some has said, as toxic. I heard one or read where one woman said, that's toxic positivity. What is that exactly? Toxic positivity. No, sit in what the sister said. Sit in if it's your minister, if it's your husband, if it's your wife, if it's your parent, if it's your coach, if it's your employer. Sit with the correction and assess it. Now, put your emotions on the shelf. Some of us don't like being called out there. Some of us don't like being called out. We want to continue moving forward in our error. But put your emotions to the side, put your ego to the side for a minute and assess, did what the person say, is what the person's saying to me, is it truthful? Could I be better? Could I do better? Now, if we confuse correction with condemnation, we're not going to accept the correction when it comes, and we're going to miss out on a crucial opportunity for growth. We're going to miss out on a crucial opportunity to improve our character and maximize our potential. And we limit ourselves. And if we're not raising our children in such a way, our nieces, our nephews, if we're not giving them correction with the love, correction with the guidance, correction with the praise, if we're not doing that, then when it comes later on, that employer, that coach, they're going to have a tough time with your young person. And when I'm working with young people, I always tell them, be open for correction, because the person that has it for you, that sees enough in you, that sees you and values you, when they correct you and you don't take it well and you get angry, you get an attitude, you push back, you become nasty, your behavior becomes ugly, and guess what? They put a timeout on offering you anything else. However, if you're that young person or that adult and someone gives you correction and they say, wow, this person can handle it, I'll give them a little more and I'll give them a little more. And they'll continue pouring into you because they see that you have the capacity to take it. And boy, when people have something to give, they want to give it to people that want it. And when we show that we're open to correction, that we're open to someone identifying a misstep on our part, then they'll want to continue giving you more and more and more. Correction is not condemnation. And, any of you who have worked with young people, or any employer for that matter, any coach, boy, you see the child, you see the employee that does not have a history or relationship with correction. And you just say, well, you know what? I can't go any further with this person. I'm trying to give them something and they won't let me. I can't go any further because they're taking what I'm giving them as an attack, as you must not like me. No, I like you so much that I want to offer you something so that you can improve your operation, whatever it is, whatever, if it's sports, if it's academics, if it's work, if it's just personal development. Can't go any further with this person. Let me look for the next person to pour it into. Let's not get it wrong. Correction is not condemnation. Correction, I repeat, is love. I want to thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Nurah Speaks podcast. It is always a privilege, and I really, really mean that. It is a privilege to be with you each and every week, and it is my responsibility to share what I think and what I know is good for our community. What do you think about this episode? What do you think about episode 161? What do you think about Nurah Speaks podcast? I'm very interested in your feedback and in your comments. I appreciate you. I love my people and I love this work. Thanks for listening. Until next time, stay in peace. Thank you for listening to another episode of the Nurah Speaks podcast. Be on the lookout for a new episode coming at you fresh next week. And as always, if you want to learn more about me and the work that I do, visit my website, NurahMuhammad.com. Or if you have a listener question, email me at info@NurahSpeaks.com. You can also follow the Nurah Speaks podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Nurah Speaks Podcast. I'll be sure to include links in the show notes. If this show has value to you, please subscribe, rate, and review, and share it with family and friends. And be sure to check out previous episodes. And remember, don't just join the movement, be the movement. Stay in peace.